Welcome to Coffee with Phil, and welcome to this new series called The Heaviness of Hope. Hope is a paradox. Hope is not something simple. It's certainly not like a helium balloon. Hope is heavy, it limps, it has scars, and that's the argument we've got to wrestle with in this series. Join me as we explore the heaviness of hope. Well, good afternoon, listeners, and welcome. Welcome, friends. Welcome to the channel. Welcome to Coffee with Phil. Welcome to my afternoon session. Just had my flat white in a tulip-sized cup, double shot of espresso with some steamed milk on top, and it was delightful. I must confess, I have got in the bad habit lately of adding a handful of M&Ms. Not into the coffee, but certainly alongside the coffee. It's become a daily thing, and I guess the sooner they run out, the better. But until they do, I'll just keep taking a handful of M&Ms, and I will supplement my afternoon coffee with the sweetness of the M&M. Therein lies my confession. Hey, welcome to Coffee with Phil, episode 177. And the title of this episode is Going the Second Mile. And I am really buzzing about this episode, and we'll get into why as we get into the content. I think you're gonna sort of see how it rolls as we go, but it's going to be really positive. You're going to love it because the essence of this episode is you were made to carry something that matters. Yes, you were. I'm speaking to you. Yes, you were made to carry something that matters. But before I get into the content, I just want to say thanks for sharing the channel. I've had some bizarre emails lately from my podcast host, automated by the software, of course. But the other day, it was, as an example, one was like, hey, yesterday you had 120 downloads. And like considering that my wife and two other people are regular listeners, that just seems just so out of the ordinary. But I think what's happening is people are sharing it and new listeners are finding it. And when they add the channel, it downloads a bunch of episodes in bulk. So that could just literally mean one new person putting a whole lot of recent episodes onto their phone. I'm confident, I'm pretty certain that they're not listening to 120 episodes in a day. But it's good news. It just means that the podcast is reaching more listeners. And my goal is really that we would do life together, a life of faith made real. Yeah, sure, we'll do it while we're drinking coffee. But we're going to grow stronger together. So thank you for sharing the podcast. Don't forget to keep doing it. If you find an episode that speaks to you or you think it will speak to one of your friends, just flick them a text or a message with the link and say, hey, grab a coffee and listen to this. I know you'll enjoy it. And I'm thanking you in advance for doing that. Well, let's get into this. The series we're in is The Heaviness of Hope. And the context of that is that we carry hope. It's a burden, and today I'm going to suggest to you that it's an intentional burden. It's one that we're designed to carry, and we're designed to carry it for a while. Problem is, when you carry the hope-filled expectation of something greater than today, and you carry it for some time or some distance, it becomes heavy. And that was my realization earlier this year, as I realized I was tired. I was just doggone tired. I was weary, but I didn't want to put hope down. I didn't want to let go of the promise. I didn't want to deny myself the opportunity that I know is in the future for those things that God has promised to become my reality, manifest by Him because of His grace, unmerited favor toward me, His Son. So I'm not putting hope down, but dang, I'm telling you, I'm tired. So the purpose of this series is to encourage me, and as I encourage myself, I hope you get encouraged as well. Because friends, as I said earlier, you were made to carry something that matters. And so today I want to talk about perseverance. I want to talk about going the second mile, and I've got a bunch of headlines down in my notes here, and we're just going to work through them together. Today, though, is about endurance. And you don't develop endurance by standing at the finish line. And you certainly don't develop endurance by sitting on the sidelines. But you do develop endurance by taking the next step. And, friends, we've got to take the next step, even when we can't see the finish line. So today, let's talk about going the second mile. You will recognize that as the wisdom of our great rabbi, and I'll get to that in just 1 second. But I also want to release myself, and hopefully you, from the burden of performance. I want to say to you that going the second mile isn't about doing more. It's about becoming more, about being the kind of person who stays. Because, well, I think the first mile proves that you're willing, but the second mile proves who you are. And remember, I've taught you this before. I've explained to you that when I say prove, I'm not saying that you earn righteousness before God. Proof, when you proof something, you make it more refined. You make it more perfect. And so, you think about the proving or the refining of silver and gold gets boiled down so the dross comes to the surface. And the silversmith takes away the dross off the top of the pot, so that the purity of the silver is what remains. And the old preacher's adage goes well here. How do you know when the silver is most pure? And the silversmith says, when I see myself in the reflection. And that's what God's doing. He's turning up the heat. He's removing the dross so that he can see himself in us as the finished product. So the first mile is proving you've just turned up. It's about being there. But the second mile really proves us. It's God's process that proves us, and it proves who he's called us to be and who we're becoming. And I got to say this, I got to keep reminding myself, we don't carry hope because we're strong. We become strong because we carry hope. So let's talk about where this all comes from, and I want to talk to you about Jesus and his Father. So let's start with Jesus. In Matthew chapter 5, let's jump there right now. Matthew chapter 5, Jesus is talking. This is him encouraging his mates here, and we just want to scroll down the page. Right to the end of Matthew chapter 5, verse 41, he's talking about retaliation, and he says, you've heard it said, an eye for an eye, a tooth for a tooth, but I say to you, do not resist the evildoer, but whoever strikes you on the right cheek, turn to him as well. Well, that's not a great setup for this, but listen here. If someone wants to sue you and take your tunic, your coat, let him have it. And if anyone forces you to go 1 mile, go with him too. So Matthew chapter 5, verse 41 becomes the key context here. And I spoke to you about this in the previous episode. I want to reference Coffee with Phil, episode 176, a couple of times today. Last time we talked about Simon the Cyrene. Make sure you catch that episode, because what I explained to you was in the New Testament days, Jerusalem was occupied by the Romans, and the Roman soldiers were there to enforce Roman law, and they had authority. And what they could do is they could compel, they could force local citizens into service. There was just something that any soldier could do. And they would force them to carry their bags or their loads or their burdens or their cart for them. And so here Jesus is saying, if anyone forces you to go 1 mile, go with him too. So the origin of going the second mile begins here in the teaching of Jesus. Now, quite some time ago, Kathy and I were watching the television series The Chosen, and it's one of those things you could just keep watching, just watch again and again and again, because it's a graphical and it's an artist's portrayal, so it's interpreted but it's a portrayal of local times and the nuances of the narrative in what was happening that's not necessarily, well, what's assumed to be happening that's not recorded in the words. So, there is a scene in an episode of The Chosen where the soldiers come to Jesus and his disciples at a crossroads, and they're on their way somewhere, and Jesus is paused at the crossroads, and the soldiers interrupt them, and they compel them. They force them to carry their helmet and their shields and their bags. And as local civilians, the disciples, they know well that they can't refuse that. And it's hot and it's dusty and they have no water. And they get to the mile marker whereby the Roman soldiers assume that they will just dump the stuff on the ground, having fulfilled their obligation. And Jesus and his disciples choose to go the second mile. And in that, and by their actions, it's portrayed in the TV show The Chosen that there's a very paradigm-shifting lesson that's given to the Romans and those that are observing by the desire that Jesus was teaching into, let's say discipling into his followers, his apprentices, this desire, the sacrificial love and service that comes through love is the gospel message. And again, the cinematography of the Chosen showed how it affected the soldiers in some ways, who were at one point mocking and then just in awe of the way that they were served by just a servant heart of Jesus and his friends. So herein lies the principle, the beginning of the lesson. If anyone forces you to go 1 mile, go with him 2. So your first mile is, well, I have to. In this context, I'm compelled to. The first mile proves that you're willing. The second mile proves who you are. And the second mile is about, I choose to do this. So the first mile is demanded of us, but the second mile is what your character reveals. And that's in the burden of who we're becoming. And I've spoken about that in the series. Go back and have a listen to that episode. But why? Why would we go the second mile? And this is where I wanna bring to you my proposition for today, my revelation for myself, and that while Jesus teaches us to go the second mile, who is it that makes the opportunity for us to go the second mile? And it's the Father. Because it's the Father who releases the promises to us, the promises that give us hope that we're carrying. This is crucial. This is the theological foundation for everything we're speaking about in the series right here, and I do not want you to miss it. So lean in. Why is it that we carry hope? We carry hope. I'm going to tell you. So it's a rhetoric question. Why is it that we carry hope? We carry hope because the God of hope has given us promises. And I've got that phrase from the Apostle Paul, the author of a significant portion, 1/3 or more, of the New Testament. In Romans 15, he says, may the God of hope fill you with all joy and peace in believing. He's not merely a God who gives you hope. Paul calls him the God of hope, and in calling him the God of hope, Paul is saying this is who he is. This is his character. God is grace, God is love, God is mercy, God is kind, God is good, God is hope. So we're taught by Jesus to go the second mile. Why would we go the second mile? Because the Father is the one who compels us in hope to live a life of hope. And so God is a God of hope. It's who he is. He invites us into that. And then in that, he invites us to a process of becoming someone who can carry what he's promised us. So the Father isn't saying, here's a promise, I hope you look forward to it. I mean, that's just such an immature, childlike way to look at things. If you say, the Father's given me a promise, who do I have to become to hold on to that promise? To be able to carry it well, to steward it, and to be a person that's got the right character, the right essence, and the right posture to hold the promise that God has for me. So the Father is the source of my hope. Then I must thereby say that carrying that hope is not like carrying an assignment where God's abandoned me to test me and prove me, and there's a chance that I might fail. I've got to wake up and realize that in carrying hope, I'm carrying something that God has entrusted to me. He's delighted at the thought that he initiated that I could become someone that was suitably qualified and of the right character in order that I could possess that hope, that thing that he has given me in hope. So we've got to point you back again to Romans chapter 5. We've spoken about this many, many times throughout the series. I'd urge you to be a reader of God's word and read for relationship. Just read the word and allow God to minister to you without you having to get a 7-point sermon or a devotional lesson out of it. Just read it to be with him. But when you read Romans chapter 5, you're going to hear the Spirit of God say that suffering, meaning walking the second mile in the dusty road, the longevity of perseverance and tiredness, suffering produces perseverance. And Paul says perseverance produces character. And character is what gives us that hope that we aspire for. So God has entrusted me. Why then would I not choose to go the second mile for the one who has promised me so much and in fact made it available? Like, let's just not, we could go down a rabbit trail here and say, well, he went all the way for me. Why would not I go the second mile for him? Because he invited me to. Like that's almost like a negative emotional pivot there that I don't want to create a manipulative kind of lever there, but like wake up. How much has Jesus carried for you? He's offering you this hope and he's saying, go the second mile, friend. And you're like, oh, I'm tired. And I'm saying, I got whiny. I got upset about it. I'm like, where is it? Come on, I've been praying, I've been waiting, I've been confessing, I've been testifying. And God's like, Jesus says, go to the second mile. And I'm like, what? Like, and then I say, why? And then I feel condemned, not judged as an unworthy, but I feel condemned by the scripture, because the scripture shines light on my heart and it reveals that I haven't worked out, that I'm doing this because I love him. He's a source of hope. And so the second mile, friend, is the second mile of love. Think of it as an offering. Think of it as a sacrifice. Think of it as incredibly personal in your devotion and your commitment to say to Jesus, no, I'm going the second mile. You know what? I'm going to go the third mile, and I'm not going because I feel forced to. I choose to. I want to. I'm making my sacrifice an offering, because love hangs around a lot longer after obligation is fulfilled. There's a difference between just doing it because you have to and giving everything because that's what love says. That's the message of love, to give everything. Jesus isn't saying, hey, look, just allow the guy to slap you on the face and go the second mile, give him your coat while you're doing it. He's not saying be exploited. He's saying become someone that's so generous and become generous beyond what is demanded of you into what you can offer beyond that. So the second mile is the mile of love. And I just wonder if you want to ponder that for a while. Like, what does it look like for you to express, to demonstrate, to communicate love in the way that God's calling you into? And Jesus says, go the second mile. I'm going to tell you what it means for me in a minute, but I want you to think about what it means for you. Now, I want to just plant in here a thought for you. I want to call you, liken you to an oxen. And the reason I'm doing that is not because you're heavy set and the ground thumps when you walk. I want to liken you to an oxen because an oxen is designed to carry a burden. And Jesus invites us to carry his yoke. Yoke is an implication of the teaching of the rabbi, but the imagery still applies that the oxen was burdened with a yoke because it was designed by God to carry a burden and to be able to do it well. And I would suggest to you that the reason that God gives us hope as a gift is because he's designed us to be people of hope. And I might have shared this in a previous episode for those of you that are picking up every episode every week. But when a racehorse goes into the stalls at the beginning of a race, their nostrils flare, they stomp, their every nerve and muscle in their body becomes tense because they know that they're about to do what they were designed to do, what they're trained to do. They're designed to run, and they're designed to run fast. When you take a dog hunting, a dog that's trained for hunting, and they're sniffing the ground and they're finding the prey, like that's what they're designed to do. They're fulfilling the purpose of the breed and the training. And so the oxen and the racehorse and the dog aren't saying, oh man, I'm tired, how do I get out of this? They know, man, I'm designed for this. And so what I'm proposing in that, by calling you the oxen, is to suggest to you that God has designed each one of us to carry hope in the promise that he has prepared for us. And in that gift of love that he's given, he's expressing explicitly that he sees more in us than we do, and that he's delighted for us to achieve that and become who he's prepared for us to be. That's the mile of love. Why would we not respond with love? Speaking of love, I just want to reference back. I said I was going to reference back to Coffee with Phil 176. It was the most recent one before this. Simon of Cyrene, who was compelled by the soldiers to carry the cross of Jesus. And I would just say to you that going the second mile is also, in it for me, is implied that we carry each other. And so I challenged you at the ending of the last episode was who are you going to walk alongside and who are you going to carry? Because Paul writes in Galatians chapter 6 verse 2, he says, bear one another burden so we fulfill the law of Christ. And I think he's referencing back not only to Jesus' teaching in Matthew chapter 5 to go the second mile, but also referencing Simon of Cyrene, and in that the teaching of Christ. Bear it, carry it, shoulder it, stay with, walk alongside. Don't just say, I'll pray for you and then disappear. Stand with. It's saying, hey, look, let me carry that with you. And if they can't carry it, let's say, look, you can't carry that, let me carry it for you. Because sometimes I think the miracle that someone needs isn't you saying you'll pray for them, it's you showing up for them. And I'm, I know the same as all you, like we're designed for community. We need each other. Maybe God's not taken away their burden. Maybe God's not taken away their burden because he wants you to stand under it. I mean, think about it. If you've got friends that you see are struggling, go to them, stand with them, and stand and put your shoulder under the burden they're carrying. So God has designed us to participate with one another, to carry what the other person can't carry. I want to come towards landing this. So I just want to 4 more points. My gosh! But the second mile is where perseverance lives. I referenced this before. Romans chapter 5, beginning in verse 3, Paul says suffering will produce perseverance, and perseverance will produce character, and character will produce hope. So that's Romans chapter 5, verse 3 and 4. But in this, we kind of want to start at the beginning and finish at the end, but we don't want the middle. And I wonder if the second mile is where the perseverance and the character happens. Because we all the premise of the series is that hope is heavy, and hope is heavy implies suffering. Now, I'm not talking about persecution. I'm just talking about longevity of waiting and my whining in that moment. But the point is, suffering will produce hope, but in between suffering and hope is perseverance and character, both being developed by God over time. A hope is not produced just because of your optimism. Hope is produced as the fruit of your perseverance through suffering and the character that flows out of it. So you could kind of say perseverance is like your hope learning to walk on its own. So like I said to you right at the start, you do not develop endurance by standing at the finish line or sitting on the sidelines. You develop endurance by choosing to take another step every day, even when you can't see the finish line. A couple of confessions as I come to land this. I want to acknowledge, and again, I'll make this my confession because it is. It's lonely to go the second mile. I'm finding it lonely. I'm finding that I've got some really good friends around me, and a couple that I speak with every week about this, and including on top of that, I've also got Kathy, who we walked for an hour this morning and just chatted about things that are going on in our lives. So I'm not saying I'm lonely because I don't have people around me. I'm saying I'm just acknowledging that the journey of the second mile is lonely. There's not many people walking the second mile, and I wonder if God invites us to do it feeling lonely so that we turn our attention fully to Him, but in that we develop self-reliance and resilience, not because we don't need God, but because He wants us to grow stronger. And I wonder, I'm not saying loneliness is bad, by the way, and I'm not looking for pity. I'm just acknowledging that you might be feeling lonely. If you're going the second mile, you might be feeling lonely on the journey. And I want you to stay the course. And I'm saying that I'm choosing to stay the course. You know, sometimes when you're raising young children and you're at home by yourself and there's just long periods of time where nobody notices what you're doing. And your kids can't give you feedback because they're too young. They just expect food or clean clothes. It feels lonely in that. Or perhaps your spouse is going on some kind of personal or emotional or physical journey and you're not quite as connected as you used to be and you haven't left and you're not leaving each other, but you might feel lonely in that season. I know I've felt lonely in leadership positions where those that are around me that were supporting me loyally and faithfully and with their lives still didn't understand what it felt like to carry the burden of leadership, to stand before God and hold yourself accountable every day. And I'm not saying that for pity, and I'm not saying it for the wrong reason. I'm saying it's part of the process. And I'm trying to acknowledge for you, before you, and for your sake also, that we accept the loneliness of the second mile. Sometimes your children are away from you, the prodigals, they get called in the church. They're just not connected to you. That's lonely. And praying for them every day, getting up every day and praying for them and believing that God has given you a promise for them, it gets lonely because they're not there and then no one sees what you're going through. Praying for healing, physical healing. I've chatted to a friend recently, hoping to have a cup of tea with her this week. In 17 years, she prayed for her dad's healing and he just recently passed. But 17 years of loneliness, of standing in the gap and interceding and believing when no one else was watching, crying tears into the pillow of intercession and a burden of prayer because God invited her into it, and it's still lonely. And there's no guarantee of an outcome. There's just an invitation into the process. Suffering produces perseverance. Perseverance produces a character of endurance, and endurance produces hope, but no one notices. And so, again, no pity for this, but the lonely thing about faithfulness is that faithfulness does not get applause while you're doing it. It's a hindsight thing. It doesn't, I don't want you to stop being faithful. I just want to acknowledge that it can be lonely. And so what I did today is went back to my chair after my lunch. House is empty, it was quiet. I wanted to go back and sit in the presence of God, dedicating myself to being in His presence without needing more than just the confidence of His presence. And I read and reread the promises, and I was pointed to scriptures that I then just read for relationship, not so much revelation, but just, God, I want to be in your word and with your word. You are the word. And I'm grateful to sit with you. And I'm saying to you, that's my second mile. That's what I'm doing in the second mile. I'm still believing. I'm believing for the things God has promised. I'm believing that He's called me to carry something. And I want to shift the series shortly to move towards what it is we're going to carry. But it's weariness, it's tiredness, it's loneliness. It's character building. And every day you got to face the temptation to say, well, I've done enough. So come on, God, you have to do your bit now. You know, I don't know where you're at. Maybe you're there too. Maybe you've prayed a lot. Maybe you prayed longer than I have. Maybe you've waited longer than I have. Maybe you've served faithfully and no one's ever noticed you. Maybe you've believed for breakthrough and believed and believed and believed and not yet seen it. And you feel like you've reached the point where it would be a legitimate option to stop. But I'm saying to you today, listen, friend, I'm saying to you, what if this is your second mile? What if it's Jesus saying, go the second mile? Not because you're trying to earn God's favor, but because you want to show him how much you love him. His love, has made you willing to keep walking. So, I don't want to tell you to go hard. I want you to stay faithful. That's what I'm saying. One more prayer. Maybe another phone call. Maybe one more act of kindness. Just one more day. One more step in the second mile. Look, friend, maybe you're tired because you've been carrying the heaviness of hope for a long time. Maybe you're lonely because not many people understand why you're still walking the way you are, the road you are. Maybe you're frustrated because you thought God would have answered you by now. I don't know what your second mile looks like, but I know this. You don't have to be strong enough to finish the whole journey today. Just take the next step. And the Father who gave you that hope will give you the grace to carry it. And when you've walked that mile, take another step.